Today's review is going to be of the Focal Clear. This is a professional version, which is pretty much the same headphone as the regular, but just with some different accessorization. So my review will pretty much be for both of them. This is a dynamic open back headphone that comes in at around $1,500 US. So it is not a cheap headphone, and out of all the headphones that I've reviewed on this channel, this is probably the most expensive. So does it live up to the price? For that, I think yes. Starting off with the build, it is really well built. You've got your really standard Focal headband with plenty of padding. I think it's perforated Alcantara on the inside, along with a black leather wrapping on the outside. You've got really nice sturdy adjustment mechanisms right here with a bit of swivel to fit most heads. And it extends quite fast, so it should be able to fit any sort of head without any issue. The hinges themselves, again, same metal and quite sturdy as well. The springs here allow for a really comfortable fit without having to adjust. So really good thought into the build, especially at the hinges. Got a really nice grille with the Focal logo. The pads themselves are more of perforated Alcantara with a nice foam inside. It is not the softest pads, it won't crumple as well as something like the Odyssey LCD 2C pads, which are memory foam, but I think these pads do a better job of keeping your ear away from the driver, so I do think it has its merit, and it is still really comfortable. The pads are still quite soft and plush. Inside you have 50mm dynamic drivers. This is using Focal's own M-shaped dome driver, and it imparts definitely some sonic qualities that I don't really hear in a lot of other dynamic driver headphones. In terms of accessories, we're looking at a box. Now this all comes in quite a large cardboard box, and you get a carrying case with it that seems to be quite nicely built. You get really nice zippers, nice strap here, as well as I can't tell what the surface of the carrying case is, but it is quite nice to the touch and feels quite sturdy. You got your Focal logo in the center, and opening up you have a really nice cutout for your headphones to fit in, and if I collapse them, they fit right in like that. And inside you've got some silicate gel, you've got your adapters, as well as a headphone cable. Now the Focal Clear comes with two headphone cables. One is a shorter portable headphone cable, the other is a longer coiled cable. Now this is for the professional version. If you're getting the regular Focal Clear, it comes with a balance cable. However, the advantage of getting the professional version is that you get two pads instead of one, and since Focal pads are very expensive and almost, if I may say, overpriced, I think that's probably the better way to go if you're looking to use a headphone for a longer period of time. The sound in this headphone is what I would say one of the most balanced dynamic headphones I've ever heard, because most dynamic headphones seem to really roll off in the bass and has a bit of a mid-bass bump. This also has a bit of a mid-bass bump, but it is very tasteful and never bleeds into the mid-range, and also has really good sub-bass extension, much better than most other dynamic headphones that I've heard. The bass is very fast, very snappy, and it is probably the most dynamic bass that I've heard in this price range. Dynamics throughout this headphone are pretty much the best at this price. I can comfortably say that. And you really get a strong sense of slam, a really strong sense of impact, physicality to the bass that you don't really get with most other headphones. Even if you compare it to something like the Odyssey, I've owned the LCD 2C as well as the LCD X, and neither of them slam as hard as these do. Both of them have more sort of like a larger bass presentation, as in the bass, it seems almost like it has a bigger image. However, the bass in this has more slam, more immediacy, more physicality, as well as more natural decay, which dynamic drivers has a really great advantage over planars in that aspect. Moving on to the mid-range. The mid-range in this headphone is again really well tuned. It is ever so slightly warmer than the Harman Target, especially in the upper mid rise. So overall, the mids on this are really well balanced. If it's a female vocal, it will have a really good balance between both sounding angelic as well as having a lot of body. So it really walks that fine line very well. And only one other headphone in this price bracket, I think, competes with that sort of level of finesse in the tuning, and that is a Headband Aria. I'll talk more about that in the comparisons. but I would say that the mid-range on this are very uncolored, maybe slightly warm, but again, it's something that shouldn't bother anyone. The mids on these headphones are also very detailed. Again, detail in this headphone, I'd say, is almost class leading, if not for one other headphone. For bass, I think this is probably the best you can get in this price bracket, but for mids, I think that would have to go to the Headband Aria. The Aria seems to just resolve a little bit better in the mid-range than Focal clears, and vocals seem more separate from the rest of the mix, which the Focal does a really good job at, but the Headband does it better. Moving on to the treble. The treble follows the same pattern of just being very well controlled and very well tuned, never sounding harsh at all, but at the same time also not being recessed like other headphones such as Audeze LCD2C. Now, other headphones can do a poor job of presenting the treble. For example, the Audeze LCD-X I found to be way too bright, way too much air, unnaturally so. The only other headphone, again, which has really good treble tuning, which is a competitor to this, is the Headband Aria. I'd say I actually like the treble on the Headband Aria a little bit better. I think it's slightly more extended and also has less of a peak at 6K. The 6K peak on this is minuscule compared to most peaks in the most headphones, and honestly it doesn't give any harsh, and all it does is throw the timbre off ever so slightly, and that's why people seem to think that the Focal headphones such as the Clear has a slight metallic timbre to it, and if you remove that peak with EQ, these sound more natural, and they already sound really natural to begin with, so it's not really much of an issue there at all. And I'd say that on most aspects this headphone is quite class leading and outdone by only one other headphone that I've heard in this price range. So I've talked about dynamics earlier and how these are pretty much the best at dynamics in this class. What about Soundstage? Soundstage in this headphone I'd say is ever so slightly lacking. I think that it is not the biggest presentation, nor is it the widest. It is quite an intimate sound. However, there's still enough room. It is nothing like a HD600 where it just seems right next to your ear. You still get enough room to separate things, to be able to pinpoint how far are away from you. Imaging, I think, is quite good on these. I do think that it is outdone by the Headband Aria. However, I'd say that it is no slouch. This headphone really does a great job of imaging and does manage to keep all the parts of the mix separate, keep all of them having their distinct directions, and it is really easy to pinpoint where something is in your music. So overall, comparisons. In its price bracket, there are two main competitors, the Audeze LCD-X and the Headband Aria. Against the Audeze LCD-X, I think that the Focal Clear slams harder, has pretty much as good detail as Audeze LCD-X, and a much better frequency response. Compared to the Aria, I think the Aria, while being a slightly more expensive than Clear, beats a Clear in most aspects. It is better than a Clear in terms of mid-range and treble detail, as well as tuning in those areas ever so slightly. However, I think I like the Focal Clear's bass tuning as well as the bass detail better. Also, the Audeze LCD-X and the Focal Clear both have much better dynamics than the Headband Aria and present the bass in a much more enjoyable way. So overall, this is probably one of the two headphones that I recommend to people automatically in this price range. So if you're looking at a headphone at $1,500 and bass is your priority, this is the headphone to get. Even if it isn't your priority, this is still worthy of your consideration as one of two best headphones in this class range that I've heard so far. So overall, great headphone, great sound, and I think that this is a really phenomenal overall package for anyone looking to get into high-end audio without having to pay for flagship price.